Chapter 1.
It was definitely an inaccuracy to say I'd lost a lot of roommates. After all, I could locate every one of them on findagrave.com. But that hadn't stopped my fellow undergraduates at Sexington University regarding me with fear and superstition. I was very much a pariah on campus, where my peers would rather stand in a lecture hall aisle than sit on the same row as me, where the only person who talked to me at all was the person I least wanted to, Professor Sexton Lovecraft. Despite that, or because of that, I was in need of somebody to talk to. I was lonely. There are a lot of stupid things you can do in those circumstances. You can run off and join the circus, for example, or watch one. One time, I even visited the newly reopened library, but the stampede for the exit was disheartening. This time I did something worse. I called the Priory of Jove about a ride-along. The Priory's one doomsday policy had seriously underestimated how many dooms Professor Lovecraft could cause in a day, and as such, they were permanently understaffed. No sooner had I demonstrated a passing interest in joining them than I was beamed across the galaxy to their ops centre near Jupiter. "Riley," Agent Tina greeted me as warmly as any other local sector chief understaffed by 30% would, and as we walked through the station, there were formalities to cover, insurance waivers to sign, a fluorescent vest to ruin my outfit, and a nightmare tablet to take. But I don't have bad dreams. "Oh, Riley," she laughed, "it doesn't stop you having nightmares. It stops the nightmares from having you." I was still thinking that through when she ushered me into the changing rooms. Naturally, I was hoping to shadow one of the agents I knew, Ollie or Joe. But apparently the tablet hadn't got the message yet because the door closed behind me and a familiar voice cried happily,
"Ragamuffin!" Chapter 2, which, as everyone knows, is always better than the original, mostly because I'm in it more.
The disappointment at seeing and hearing the professor was exacerbated by his state of undress. The towel around his waist preserved some decency, but I would have been happier if it wasn't so obviously a tea towel. A second was being used to dry his lower body as he called my name.
"Ragamuffin, do you want me to show you how I came up with that fortnight dance?"
I nearly clung to Agent Tia as she excused herself, but by then resignation had set in. I gave my escape a final chance. "I thought you were confined to Earth. What are you doing here?"
"I'm a special,"
he enthused.
"and it doesn't even mean what it means at school. I get a badge and a neurofire. Want to see?"
Not half as much as I want to see you dressed. Focusing far too much on an unintended positive interpretation of that, his smile widened.
"What the lady wants, the lady gets."
What I really didn't want was the intermediate stage between toweled and dressed, but it's what I got. He looked, if you're wondering, like the sort of fireside rug that is only considered fashionable in Canadian hunting lodges. Before long, we were in the cockpit of the agency issue FO. The professor took the driver's seat and shortened our life expectancy by another notch or two. He indicated the computer in the dash and said that as a rookie, I could choose which of the outstanding crime reports we should investigate. I looked through the list intending to find the least suicidal. Murders and robberies were obviously out. Likewise, anything that appeared safe, such as a dispute over some graffiti, was obviously going to be a trap involving monsters that scrawled their declarations of war in their enemies' blood. I was not confident in the professor's driving either, least of all because he was furiously waggling the FO's joystick and making racing noises with his mouth. I settled on a report of speeding aliens. Although they were in a galaxy far, far away, the Priory has the sort of technology that would make Elon Musk wet himself. We prepared to walk through the nightmare realm and, all being well, we'd be there before the crime was even reported. Of course, things are rarely well in warp space, but if you have a competent pilot, there's nothing to worry about. The professor pressed go, and I prepared to die. Everything went black. To stare into real darkness, to hunt for mere bleak oblivion, emptiness, is to invite madness. The mind will conjure tortured phantoms, blur misshapen shadows to stave off the truth. But darkness is all that exists out beyond dreams and death. Its abode, the same mind-shrivelling madness it brings, is full of the unknown but knowing, things beyond human, abhorrent and monstrous, that in pits of evil wait implacably. The dawn and death of man are an instant to one with such wicked purpose, and they wait for their prey to come. And it does, inevitably. And from darkness they weave shades demonic and hideous, the inhuman yet uncanny shadows of what we can be in famine, disease and sadism. And in beauty corrupted. The girl from college, her eyes yellowed, feline, feral to sneer contempt and hatred. The boy from class, unrecognisable as snakes move through his eyes and mouth, and I hear the racking agony of the darkness's laugh as he says, "Vigilo tu espina!" And I say, even I know that's not right. And across the light I hear a song about a man named Azizi who owns a nuclear war. A nuclear war. Azizi, whoever he is, has a nuclear war. And we drop out of warp. The professor is singing as he disables the speeding ship. He's whistling as we hook up to the aft airlock. I think he forgot the words. They sounded stupid anyway. But we're confident as we go on board to issue their ticket. Looking back, that confidence was horribly misplaced.
Chapter 3 is like poetry. It rhymes with tea, Earl Grey.
The standard Priory pressure suit comes with a funky little gadget that looks a lot like a balloon when you activate it. It checks the atmosphere isn't going to explode your eyeballs or anything. And when it chirps happily, you know you're safe. At least from the air. The offending ship was a small cargo freighter, so with our balloon drifting happily in front of us, it didn't take long to reach the bridge. The irate crew waiting for us seemed less than pleased at our intervention. The prof whipped out his tablet to follow the on-screen procedure, asking the questions in a mechanical tone the machine would have done well to imitate.
Do you know how fast you were going?
Yes, the captain barked. And it should be obvious from that we're in a hurry. So if you could just issue the ticket, we'll be on our way.
Where are you?
He paused as the technology took a moment to update the second page of questions. The delay only served to irritate the captain further. His eyes rolled and his clenched jaw made me look around for weapons. The immediate problem I noticed was that we didn't have any, and they did. All of them.
Going?
The professor finished. Coruscant.
On bottom plates.
Sensing the captain's rising anger, the first officer interjected jovially, "We're just cruising. For tail. You know how it is." His flattery worked on the professor, who smiled and was about to say how much he knew how it was, when another officer ruined everything. "Haven't you got any real criminals to catch?" he demanded. The professor turned back to his screen, unaware of the danger simmering around us. I crept behind him. His uniform might be bulletproof, or at least more resistant than our spongy bodies, but I was only an observer, and the epaulets that announced as much weren't stopping anything more dangerous than a Vulcan neck pinch from the Black Knight.
It says here,
the professor said, looking over the screen some more.
Your emissions are 3% over the limit and you haven't paid your congestion charge.
It's a vacuum, the snarky crewmate fumed, and I've omitted all his naughty words. The tablet flashed up a message that said the crew member would have had to be cited for his language, and I shot off a hasty prayer that the professor would let it go. I should have known that God would want nothing to do with him either.
I have to give you a ticket for the swearing.
Like hell you will.
That too.
He hadn't looked up from his computer, hadn't noticed the crew were on their feet now, hadn't noticed their hovering hands creep towards their pistols. But I had. I frantically tugged the professor's sleeve. That too was a mistake. With his arm juddering under my efforts, his fingers hit the screen uncontrollably. The computer reset.
Damn,
he muttered, shaking me off, shooting me, but agonisingly not the approaching crew, an annoyed glare.
I'll have to start again.
He resumed his tapping, unaware of the hiss of guns clearing holsters. I grabbed the Neurofire from his belt, and as the guns pointed our way, I fired.
Chapter 4, in which I deny ever having had a 5 1/4-inch floppy.
The effect of the weapon was immediate. It pulsed through the room and the crew stopped in their tracks. They slumped and jerked and then their guns dropped, forgotten or chewed. They began hooting and hollering incoherently and jumping on and over the bridge's equipment. One crew member, crawling over a control station, pressed the right combination of buttons to open the airlock, and the Atmo balloon drifted on the currents into this new space. It was catnip to the old crew, who unleashed a barrage of new hoots and chased it with wild enthusiasm. The ship rumbled, as if chuckling heartlessly, and they were all icy corpses in space before the professor even looked up. The tablet printed the required tickets, and I think he was disappointed to discover there was nobody left to receive them.
Good grief, what a brouhaha,
he stated, leaving the tickets on that captain's armrest in case he unfroze, came back from the dead, regained his intellectual capacity, navigated the airlock, and was any less murderous than when we started. He's optimistic like that sometimes.
Well,
he said, the job completed to the satisfaction of him and any passing undertakers.
It's about time for a cuppa.
The controls he decided most likely to satisfy his thirst flashed a number of screens, blueprints and such, until he hit it with the palm of his hand and demanded,
Tea, milk, sugar, 1 lump.
at which point it shut down completely and ejected a 5¼ inch floppy disk. Until that point, I must confess, I hadn't fully processed what had happened. In truth, all I'd done was stare at the now empty airlock while my lower jaw had drifted floorwards. While I hadn't exactly killed anyone personally, and my life had clearly been in danger, it's hard to deny I was involved in a suddenly booming corpsicle industry. The surge of guilt churned my stomach, and I swallowed hard or else I'd vomit. I was grateful when the professor took back the neurofire I was white-knuckling. The natural response to being completely innocent in any purely accidental multi-manslaughter is to want to make amends. I could see the ship safely to where it was going, inform their friends, blame the professor, that sort of thing. But looking at the data on the professor's floppy, I discovered something that would complicate things a touch. Professor, it says here this data is stolen.
A 2 for 1,
he declared happily.
Who does it belong to?
This was a new concern, to be honest. Previously, I'd been worrying about the thieves' accomplices wanting to retrieve their contraband and murder the people that had it. I checked the metadata. Some kind of galactic empire thing.
Is there a reward for returning it?
I was 3 months away from my next quarterly student loan check, and a reward would have been very helpful. I was considering if I needed new shoes or food first when a female voice came through the comms unit.
Captain Tuco, come in.
A ship appeared outside. The prof was about to respond to the hail. I stopped him. Professor, think! An optimistic request at the best of times, so I hurriedly explained my concern. These people stole this data. I don't think the victims of the crime would be calling them by name.
Who is it then?
It's their accomplices.
And they'll have a reward?
If they see we killed all of their friends, they might have something else in mind.
Ooh, sex?
They're going to kill us!
Oh, shame. I'm sorry, I was distracted by TikTok over. Where were we? Oh yes, chapter 5.
I switched the comms and affected my most English of tones. Please hold for Captain Lovecraft. He made a gesture, eloquently asking what he was supposed to do. I mirrored it. Then a girl appeared on screen. She had a terrible dress and a worse hairdo, but she was undeniably pretty, which always gives the professor an idea. Not usually a good one, but anything is better than nothing. He purred.
Well, hello, my lovely. What can I do you for today?
There are supposed to be 5 of you, but our scanners show only 3. Where's Captain Tuco?
He, stepped outside for a bit.
Do you still have the data, Captain?
Of course,
he said.
But tell me, where do you buy your bras?
She was momentarily stunned, but replied,
B&Q. Adhesives aisle.
She went quiet, listening to someone on her crew we couldn't make out.
Captain, there's an Imperial Star Destroyer heading this way. Please, for the sake of the galaxy, send us the Death Star plans.
At his signal, I put her on hold.
I'm torn, rhinoplasty. With all these Star Destroyers and Death Stars, does this empire sound under evil to you?
You're thinking we should send her the files?
I'm thinking you should. I'm already a convicted felon.
I was still struggling with a retort when a siren went off on another console. Though the professor was far from busy, his only response was to cock an eyebrow in my direction. I sighed and I muttered, but I went over and looked at a series of displays and alarms that meant absolutely nothing to me, though it is rare that sirens indicate anything good.
Well?
I don't know what any of this means.
You could work that one,
he grumbled, pointing at the station I'd just left. That one's a glorified Nokia. The last teens that couldn't work it were Joseph Fritzl's kids. Our friend was back on the screen and clearly agitated.
Captain, our scanners show your hyperdrive is engaging. Come in, please.
The computer chimed in. Warning, hyperdrive engaging. Please set a destination. The professor tutted at me and looked at the gobbledygook-covered screen himself.
See, it's no big deal. It's just the hyperdrive engaging.
Professor, I said patiently, if the warp drive starts with no destination set, it will strand us in the nightmare realm. The professor just tutted.
Superstitious nonsense.
I sighed for longer than I'd like to with my life in normal space ticking down on a screen. Null space, then. It'll strand us forever in null space.
Good grief,
he said.
It'll be like going to France. I'm fairly sure those yoga pants have also been sucked into a black hole, one as delightful as chapter 6.
A rumble went through the ship. An expression of riotous anger only usually heard where Amy Schumer is revealed as a surprise guest. I was clinging to the rattling furniture, battling to stay upright, when the professor, cool as a cucumber, announced,
I believe we can help the hottie. On my web drive you'll find some Victoria's Secret catalogues. Send them over immediately. Oh, and the plans if she still wants them.
I had, hoping for something more, been moving back towards the comms desk. 60 seconds to null space, the ship announced. I couldn't help but wonder who would program such a matter-of-fact tone into such a brief but important message. Would it not relate the appropriate urgency if they injected a little terror and shrill panic?
Don't worry, Ratatouille. It'll only take a few seconds to reach our ship. You're perfectly safe.
The freighter growled again. Sparks fell from overhead fixtures. I did not feel his calm or perfectly safe. I rushed to prepare his files to send. There were a lot of files. 45 seconds. Insert destination or abandoned ship. You want me to send all this? I asked. A tone of pleading that had started in my sphincter squeaked into my voice. He nodded. This, I meant the console I was using, isn't exactly cutting edge. I'll have to split this into several transmissions.
The sooner you're done, the sooner you're gone.
The files queued, began sending. Watching the purple progress bar creeping left to right was a nerve-shredding torture. Every split second it appeared frozen, unmoving. My heart stopped too, only to pound again with each 0 and 1 sent down the line. 30 seconds, abandoned ship. The dates of the catalogues flicked by, years and years, going back before I was born, file after file, a dozen files. A generation ticked the purple bar up 1 more pixel. 15 seconds, abandoned ship. The freighter shook again, rattled. Tiles and light fixtures dropped from the ceiling.
Well,
The professor yawned.
I'm just gonna check out the FO. Coming on when you're done here. See you in a minute.
10 seconds, abandoned ship.
Well, maybe not.
He left. The rotten bastard left. Left me copying his sticky internet history as the ship shuddered apart around me.
We have the files,
The girl's voice said.
Thank you, Captain. You are our only hope.
That sounded like a line she'd use on all the boys. I wondered if I should hate her for it. Deciding I should wait for the Netflix documentary before I made my mind up, I ran for the airlock. 5, the lights blinked out, came back on. 4, I crashed from one wall to the other, the ship lurching and trembling. 3, I slapped and scraped carpet, scrambling to regain my feet. 2, I'm getting minimum wage for recording this. Flat rate, they'll probably use it in every ship in the fleet. If I got £1 for each one, I'd be 1,000 air. Stuff this job. Nobody will ever hear this anyway. But if you do, good. I hope you die. That seemed very unprofessional. My hand reached for the airlock door. I strived. My God, I strived so very hard. The ship disappeared. Darkness swarmed.
And then I can make out voices. They were screams of agony, wails of utter loss and grief. I think I preferred the silence, but out of that eternal nothing I saw a light, jaundiced and sickly. It split in two, and as I neared it, or it neared me, I realised I was looking at 2 doors, outlined by that grisly light leaking around their edges. One bore the mark of a black circle, the other a white crescent. Both posted a sentinel, a guard, and both were Sexton Lovecraft, abominably recreated in primeval clay that slid and oozed out of its forced masquerade.
Open my door, Malcolm.
The black circle rasped.
I have 2 hits for Duran Duran. Ignore him.
White crescent urged, drooling thick ochre from the corner of its uneven mouth.
Open my door. We're having a party. All of your friends are here.
It was easy to tell both gross and slobbery creatures were lying. I had no friends, and the professor would not give away Duran Duran tickets. Not if he could charge for them anyway. But what could I do? I had no idea where I was. I always flunked surprise quizzes. What was this even a test of? But I did remember something. A song about war and an Italian gentleman, and the sexton by the white crescent door was humming it. Badly. But it was a sign. I told myself. It was a sign. No, I convinced myself that it was. And I stepped forward with purpose. And I reached for the door, and White Crescent grinned a lopsided and feral little smile, and I ducked. Black Circle, creeping up behind me, crashed over me into his double. While they were tangled, I put my boots to work, and thanks to the good Dr. Martin, I can kick testicles with the best of them. Your Latin sucks, I said as they whimpered off a gale force size 7. Tui means you're. 2S is you are.
In chapter 8, I get breakfast. A happy ending for everyone. Other stuff happens too. Let's find out what.
Fingers closed around mine. I felt the tug and the weightlessness as I span through nothing and tumbled to the airlock floor. There was a bright flash and a surge of movement, like drifting on a choppy tide.
You took your time?
The professor said as I got to my feet. I was dumbstruck, disorientated and furious, and not being able to summon an appropriate response just made it worse. I wanted to kick and scream and yell. But looking at his blank face, I knew it wouldn't do any good at all. Some kind of vague realization appeared in his eyes.
You've been a bit glum lately. Is something bothering you?
No, not my best lie. Maybe not even a smart one, but screw it. Let's go back.
We can stop the breakfast of the way.
This idea perked him up. It did nothing for me, but I still had to sit with him while he ate eggs in an orbital cafe over Areta. We returned to the Priory. I had hoped, maybe, Ollie or someone I knew would be there to welcome me back, but there wasn't. Amongst all the hustle and bustle of ships and agents, the constant coming and goings, the endless buzz of communication, there was nobody.